Hi, I'm Gareth.
Hi, I'm Jackie. We are Vegan FTA. Welcome to a super special episode of our series Activist.
For those out there who've watched The Game Changers, Patrik Baboumian needs no introduction as he is a firm fan favourite.
The more you learn about Patrik, the more you learn that there is far more to the man than simply muscle. Ever since he was a young age, Patrik has wanted to save the world. And now, when the world needs a hero more than ever, Patrik is using his incredible strength and compassion to create one for us.
We are absolutely delighted to bring you this interview. We really hope you enjoy it. Come check it out. Becoming like,
Thank you.
I gotta say,
Thank you.
if my face starts doing weird things, it's because I've been smiling so much all day, so my cheeks are starting to get sore. I've just been so excited. So yeah, I can't thank you enough for coming.
Awesome. I'm super happy as well. I just a minute ago read the questions, and I could read the appreciation for what we're doing through the questions. So I'm super happy to have this interview.
It's wonderful to have you on board with our activist series, and the whole point of our activist series is to help to encourage people to get more active in the vegan movement in a way that however fits them best. So every single one of us has a skill, some kind of strength that we can use to help to make the world a better place. So your latest project, however, we're so excited to see this, but it's something that many people wouldn't expect from the world's strongest vegan, and yet it's such a brilliant example of creative activism, which is a wonderful and a very different form of activism. So I've got to ask, because this was, I've been following you for a while, and I don't know where I've been under a rock or something, but how long have you been a comic book fan?
Actually, my thing that I have with comic book characters started when I was very, very young. Let me think. So I am. You maybe know that I lost my dad pretty early. I lost my dad when I was 4 years old. Now I have memories of being terrified by watching the Hulk TV series with Lou Ferrigno back in the day with my dad and my mom. So that must have been before I was 4, right? Because he died then. And what I can remember very vividly is that every time that he would Hulk out, when you would have this transformation of Bruce Banner into the Hulk. Of course, I mean, I was probably 3 years old, so it would completely terrify me. And I would be under the table, and my parents being on both sides watching TV, and I would be screaming and running under the table to both of them and trying to kind of find some safety in them defending me from this monster that I was seeing. That I was 3 years old. I didn't know that that's just a TV thing, and the monster is not real. So that's basically my earliest memories that are connected to comic book characters. So yeah, I have a thing with comics that goes way back, and a special thing with the Hulk actually. And then later on, when I was growing up, and when I went through this more difficult age of puberty and so on, I became more and more into Wolverine, because he was reflecting that always annoyed, pissed off part of my own personality. That really resonated with me back in the day, and I to be really honest, still resonates with me. And also the fact that he's just so much more authentic than most superheroes. They're just um, you know just way too perfect sometimes. Like not as relatable, because they almost some of them have barely any flaws. And Wolverine is just full of flaws, and that makes him so relatable, I think.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for that insight. It's so wonderful to hear from you. Even the huge, strong man, is still being scared by this, when you're little. And
I feel you, because that was me. I was a few years older, and that was me hiding behind the couch with the Hulk as well. So I totally get you on that one.
He got us all. Good old Lou Ferrigno. And that was actually the origin of my fascination with bodybuilding as well. So Lou Ferrigno was with Arnold together, was one of the, iconic bodybuilders of the golden age of bodybuilding. And I think these two things have been with me since then. The fascination for, having way too much muscle on your body than you actually need. And the fascination for, comic book stories.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Makes total sense.
So everyone's heard of heroes such as Superman, Batman, and of course the Incredible Hulk. These characters have stood the test of time, and they've become recognized throughout our society. And comic books, themselves are largely viewed as a wholesome form of entertainment, and they can also actually explore some very deep themes and shine a light on society from a different angle. So how important is it to you to have these fictional characters in our lives, to have someone to look up to, and to have that that escapism, we can delve into their world and escape for a while?
Yeah. For me, that was a very important part of of my life. It's and it's actually these stories serve many different functions. But one of the functions that was always very central to me was actually the escapism that they give you, because these heroes, they face some kind of darkness that might resemble something that some demon that you are fighting in your personal life, and they have the power to do things that we as individuals we can't, right? So it's very cathartic to be able to basically have a simulation of the problems that you have in your own life, but in this simulation the problems really get resolved, and the problems get defeated in form of a villain or whatever it is. So I think that's and it's not only comic books, it's basically storytelling overall. Like for me, it's video games are a part of that too. I've always also been a complete video game nerd, so and that was way before being a gamer was mainstream. I mean, today everybody plays something, but back in the day I was just like, in my classroom I was the only guy who was playing video games, and everyone would think, that's strange dude. What is he doing? So for me that was always, if you know a little bit about my backstory, that very early on I've experienced a lot of chaos and stuff that as a child you don't really want to experience. So having this other world, this fantasy world where I could escape to, and I could basically have these experiences, or watch some heroes have these experiences, and take just take a little vacation from the harsh reality that we sometimes live in. That was huge for me. So and that's part of the reason that I've been always thinking about knowing how much power that had for me, always thinking about how I could use that kind of power to further what I was doing as an athlete and as an activist, the message that I was trying to basically bring to the world as an athlete and as an activist, how I could probably combine that with that other love of mine. And Earthraiser is basically the outcome of that.
It's awesome. Well, all things considered, you are the perfect person to be bringing us a new generation of superheroes. So, is that something that you ever really imagined, would become a reality, actually writing your own comic story?
Not really, actually. So I've been planning to do something with storytelling for quite a long time. I'm talking about that in the campaign video on Kickstarter as well. So that's that's something that I've been thinking about for the last at least 5 years. But I wasn't imagining a comic story. I was actually imagining more a film or maybe a book or something. I knew I wanted to tell a story, but I didn't know exactly what medium I wanted to use for that. And then when I had this idea that came to me in a sleepless night in a hotel room, basically, that's just 6 months ago, where it really hit me what I could use to make everything work. at that point, I was imagining a film. When I was writing it in that hotel room that night, I was writing an outline to a film. And that stayed that way for several months. So I was working on it, and I was trying to, give it more structure and make it work, and always, working towards a screenplay until just I think like 2 months ago or so, where I realized that, hey, I knew this guy, and that's David, the artist who is doing all the artwork in Earthraiser. So David contacted me last year, and his idea was, well, if I would be up for it, we could do just basically a comic book story about me. So it was, his idea was not about, making a new hero. It was basically, let's turn you into a comic book hero. And that was cool, and we played around with that idea, but it didn't really go anywhere until 2 months ago, where I all of a sudden thought, wait a minute, it is going to be really hard to sell this story as a film, because in these days, if you want to make a really successful film, especially for that kind of story, that's going to cost a lot of money. So I was just thinking, how am I going to put this into reality? This is going to be really hard. And then if I want to work with a big production company or a big publisher, they're going to take away a lot of the power from me, and then I didn't want to lose the power over the story, because for me the story is very personal, and it's supposed to basically do something that is very dear to my heart outside in the world. So I was afraid, if I worked with some big company, then it might turn out to be something completely different than I was intending. So I didn't want to make this happen. So my idea was, wait a second, I know this guy, he wants to make a comic, and we can easily, convert this into something that will work in a comic book. And that's when we started working on it, and we've been working for, at least the last 4 weeks. We've been working with a crazy, crazy amount of effort every day on it, and I'm so super happy to now be able to give it to the world and see how people react to it. We also had to postpone it for quite a few times. We postponed it for a week. It was intended to come out 2 weeks ago. Then we postponed it because I wasn't quite happy with where we were. And then because of Black Lives Matter, and because of what's happening in the US, and out of solidarity for that, and because I didn't want to come out with something huge just a week ago when that was something that was in the center of attention in the general public, I didn't want to take away from that. So out of respect for what's happening there, I thought, I'm going to postpone this for another week. And so now we're here, and I've been waiting for this for quite some time now. So I'm really excited to see, what kind of dynamic this is going to have once it's out of our hands, and people are gonna, do stuff with it that is not under our control.
Well, that's brilliant. So obviously it's been, a long thing coming, and I suppose that's when a dream is coming to fruition, and it's taken so long to get there. Good on you for, taking the time, to respect what's going on. And, what's another couple of weeks when, that dream is coming on the horizon. And even if it is, the blueprint, the manuscript for the film later down the track, hopefully we'll get you all closer to that. And I'd love to see it in a film format, Earthraiser, it's absolutely brilliant from what we can see in the sort of previews at the moment. But it seems to be a real wake-up call in encouraging people to feel empathy for both vegans and non-vegans. What kind of world is it set in?
Yeah, so the basic idea about it was, and this goes back right to like 5 years ago, when I was thinking about how I could write a story that would open people's eyes for what's happening to animals, because that's literally what's going on for a big portion of the public. People don't really think about what's happening to animals. So it's usually, most people are not indifferent. It's not that, like, when I think of myself before I went vegan, and before I went vegetarian, it was not that I was rescuing animals. I was rescuing wildlife, putting a lot of time and energy into trying to help these animals. And at the same time, I was eating other animals. And I didn't really, I was just not really making the connection that there was something wrong with that. So the idea to write a story for me was, I want to reach people who are at that stage where I was back then, and just give them a story that opens their eyes for what's happening, and then ideally maybe gets them on a track to get to where I am now. That was the idea. So my idea how to do that was initially, well, if the animals could talk, or if someone could talk to them, then that would, then that someone could basically tell us what they go through, and could serve as a medium basically to get that message from the animals themselves to us. But then I thought about that idea, and every time I was trying to make it work, I thought, no, this is Dr. Dolittle. So like, so I thought, this doesn't, it didn't really cut it. And the actual revelation that I had in that night in the hotel room was just basically, wait a second, it is not about talking. What it's really about is the suffering that is going on. And for that, you don't have to talk to the animals. If you were in some kind of, magical or scientific situation, that causes you to feel the actual suffering that is happening to the animals, but then also to humans, to basically everyone around you, because I wanted to make the story as inclusive as possible. So I didn't want to make another, I didn't want the message to become another campaign that is focusing just on the animals. I wanted to, make this as inclusive and broad as possible. So I thought, well, there are humans suffering everywhere as well. So if there was someone who was trapped in a situation where he would feel all of that pain, and then I thought, well, nobody could survive that. So that's got to be a superhero. And that got me excited, because I thought, whoa, a superhero story is way more awesome than just a story. So, it started to snowball from there on. And that's why I couldn't go back to sleep. So I just basically spent the whole night, the video that you see in the campaign video, that footage is not from that night. I had bigger post-its to write the story on. That was just for entertainment and presentation purposes.
It was great imagery, though.
So to be completely honest, I didn't have a post-it at all. I just sat down and just basically typed everything into my phone. And I had a list that was just basically like this, of 20 different things that came to my mind in that night. And most of them I just kept and, worked upon them to build this whole world and story. But to get back to the initial question, so to make that kind of thing work, where I want to open people's eyes, you can't have a world that is too fantastic. So there are fantastic, comic-y things happening in the story, but nothing that is happening is, I'm trying to basically have a world that resembles ours, with the same kind of rules, and the governments are the same, and the political problems and dynamics are the same. But the fantastic elements are always grounded on some kind of science, or, well, pseudoscience. So I'm trying to make them at least believable, so that you don't have the feeling that you're just, just watching just a fantasy film that has nothing to do with our own reality, because I want people to make that connection.
Yeah, for me, I love those sort of fantasy worlds, which are sort of grounded in slight realism. Because for me personally, I'm a huge Warhammer nerd, and so they do the whole grim darkness thing, where a lot of it is based on historical stuff, but it's removed, but then there's still those elements, and just brilliant for bringing in that connection. So I can't wait to find out more about it.
Oh, definitely. We were talking about it today, actually, in that integrating things with the real world today, and back with the comic books, with the Batman, and the bad guys, the Joker, the Riddler, and the Penguin, all of those, they just stuck out like sore thumbs. They had, quirky costumes and basically like, here I am, come get me kind of thing, and the real world's not like that. The bad guys are everywhere. They're hiding, they're among, it's not just one big bad guy kind of thing. It goes much deeper than that. And so, I think it's great that we really do need a new generation of superheroes. So it's brilliant. I'm really excited as well. So, and I love the idea how you took the idea of a vegan superhero, but you didn't just make him like Popeye, just this is about my diet, I have lots of spinach. The concept of suffering is so huge, and once you understand that suffering as vegans, it makes you look at everything differently. So I can't wait to see how many people's eyes this opens.
Actually, one thing that I like to add is another thing that was very important to me is because you mentioned the Joker and classic basically superhero stories, and also that goes for classic fantasy stories as well. Often you have in the classic sense a very clear distinction between good and evil, like black and white. And that's not what's happening in the world. In the world, that distinction goes through every individual. So you have aspects that are good, and then you have aspects that are not very helpful. And everyone has strengths and flaws. I know what I'm talking about. I try to have that in the story as well. So there will be no super evil villain or anything. There will be adversaries. And I made them powerful. Like in the beginning of the story, the main adversary or the first adversary that we get to know is Agent D. And if you watch the video, you're gonna probably notice that I tried to make her as badass as possible. So she's actually the most powerful character so far from what I present to people. And that was on purpose. So she's very powerful and she's a threat in the beginning, but she's not just evil. And you also cannot rely on the fact that the bad guys are going to stay bad guys until forever. It might, there might be some switching, and some of the friends might turn into a problem, and then some of the bad guys might actually turn out to be helpful. Who knows?
The suspense is killing me already. I love how the biggest badass at the moment that you've revealed at least is female as well. It's like, oh, I like this guy even more already.
That's just as I say in the video, I took a lot of my autobiographic experiences, and the baddest person that I have ever known in my whole life with really an incredible amount of strength was my mom, who just passed away just a few weeks ago. So I know so many strong women. So it was for me, it was not about I want to have a strong female character, but it was, I know how badass women can be, so I want to have that in the story.
Oh, that's awesome. I bet she would love that too.
But creative projects like Earthraiser show how the world is changing right now. And you've mentioned how you want to create a cultural shift and hopefully change millions of hearts and minds through this narrative. Is it your hope that people will recognize the suffering around them through, going through and reading this? Actually, a lot of the story and a lot of what the actual idea is about how to reach your normal person who goes into a theater and has actually nothing to do with veganism, probably doesn't even know anything about the vegan lifestyle, probably actually has a lot of misconceptions about it. And it's just someone who doesn't think a lot about that alternative to live a life that is just less harmful to our animal, our fellow animal beings. So I wanted to reach those people because, I mean, of course, it's great to write a story that is going to make vegans feel good. That's awesome. I mean, I love the vegan movement, and I get so much love out of it. So it would be great, but my
actual, bigger goal in that sense is to create change. And I can't create change just by tapping vegans on the shoulder and saying, well, you're doing great. So that's already happening. We have, we have vegan superheroes already, and they're doing exactly that. And that's great. Like I see sometimes some of them on some vegan events, and people are having fun, and that's absolutely awesome. But my goal was to reach out to all these other people. And for that, that's actually the reason why it is not a core part of the character that he's vegan. He's going to be vegan because if you feel the pain of everyone around you, you can't eat meat. That's not going to work. It's going to completely spoil everything that would motivate you to do that. So he's of course not going to be consuming animal products, but that's not the core concept. The core concept was I wanted a character that is like the non-vegan viewer. So and then he is going to stop consuming animals, and I'm going to have that in the story. So that's going to be a part. It's going to be told that that's the case, but it's going to be because this curse that he has opened his eyes, and because he realizes, wow, this is terrible. I cannot participate in that, and he has no choice then to not consume animals and to care about them and to start liberating them and so on. It's just he's forced to do that. And so the idea is, ideally, if I don't do a completely shitty job as a storyteller, I'm going to, in the beginning, establish the character in a way that if you're a viewer, you're going to identify with him and you're going to care about what's happening to him. Then you're going to feel his pain when he gets in that situation. And then when he starts making decisions based on that pain, you're going to probably start to think, this doesn't actually feel, it kind of makes sense. So that's my basic idea. Ideally, I would want to see someone go out of the theater or go out of reading the book and thinking, there's something to this. And, and then probably they wouldn't have to, it's not about brainwashing them into going vegan. It's about making them think about some things that we usually ignore. And then another thing you can do to do that is basically what a lot of animal rights organizations do, and some covert activism does with going into facilities and filming what's happening and then showing that to people. But the problem is because our psyche is not really built to take that much stress. Basically, a lot of people just watch the other way and don't really want to see that. So in this story, because I'm making it, I'm putting the story into a fantastic world and making it about superheroes and so on. That is kind of a nice packaging to get that very powerful but also hurtful message to people who would normally not watch these videos, those gruesome videos that you can get in the internet that show the actual truth in the world. So by the whole reason to put this into that package is just to give it to people in a digestible form, so that hopefully they are going to get the same effect, but in a way that they can handle it psychologically.
Yeah, it's a great tactic. I mean, different things resonate with different people, as we all know, and I think it's great. I mean, already I know of several non-vegans that I'm thinking, there's a Christmas present for you this year, and there's a Christmas present for you, and you and David, David Padilla, he is, obviously a great team, fantastic team from what I've seen so far. I love his artwork, and even just the cover of Earthraiser, for me, that's not normally my kind of thing, and it just makes me think, I just love the look of it. Can't wait to just see more of it. Are we right as well in spotting this cheeky little reference to a certain wee green leaf on the cover?
That is David. That is David. Why we're talking about him, that is, that was, it was actually a joke. he sent the cover to me without the leaf, and then he sent that version with the leaf to me, and I just looked at it and I thought, no, this is too good to not do it. Because it is absolutely absurd, because he's in a situation where he's obviously in distress. He's chained to this metal globe, and now this is actually an actual scene from the beginning of the book, where he's going to be in a secret military prison, and he's going to be interrogated because he had this attack while on a mission, and Agent D had to apprehend him and get him to that prison. And she just basically wants to know what is happening and why he hurt his two friends, and while they were trying to get him under control. And there's this whole interrogation going, and it's a pretty uncomfortable situation for him. And then you have that thing. So it's absolutely absurd, but that's why I loved it so much. I just said, just keep it. And right now I'm still thinking about making it an actual thing about him, that he's just basically always going to walk around with and because I'm trying to give him some features that he shares with me. When I was a child, my favorite drink was spearmint syrup. I don't even know if that's a thing anywhere outside of Iran, where I'm, born, and where I spent my childhood. So it's basically spearmint syrup, and then you can just put that into water, just to flavor water with it. And that was my favorite drink as a child. So I'm thinking about having him just chew on some spearmint, just all the time, even if he's in a fighting situation or something, and everything is burning around him, he would still have that little bit of thing. But I can't guarantee that's going to make it into the story, but we're thinking about it.
Superhero, and he's always got fresh breath as well. What more can you want?
Yeah, that's it.
I love it.
Well, you yourself, and you've even touched on this before, you yourself was already like a hero to many, and even the previous comic, making you into the superhero. Now you've created one yourself, it's must be exciting to see Wolf, the protagonist, to come to life. How alike are you two?
I would say there are a lot of parallels, but I know that Wolf would disagree, because he would think I'm a total idiot and completely useless. So he's basically, if I was in a world where all those superheroes that I grew up with, if I was in that world, I would imagine, or I would like to be like Wolf. So he's basically something that I would think, would be that I would play as a character in a video game or something, a simulation. So and it's obvious that I would create him in such a way. But I gave him some parallels to myself, and the reason that I did that was because I wanted to make the story also authentic. And it's always so much easier to write about stuff that you feel yourself. And because I had this very kind of my life was so so crazy, and I've seen so many things in my life. There's a huge repertoire of stuff that I can take from there, and I can just put on him. Like one of the parallels is, for instance, he's losing his dad in a bombardment in a war situation. Now, in the story, I'm going to spoil a little bit, but it's not really a spoiler, because that's going to be basically something you read on the first page. So it's not really spoiling too much. In the first page, you see him as a child, and you see how he loses his dad, because that trauma explains a lot of the flaws that he actually has, and a lot of the problems that he has to overcome later on. That situation with the bombardment is something that I have experienced, but that is not something that happened to me. So the parallel to me is I lost my dad when I was when I was a child. But the bombardment thing actually happened to a neighbor of us, and I actually so there was a bombardment, and I was outside, And the only thing that I saw from that is that our so that was a neighbor that lived on the opposite side of the street, and their father worked at a oil refinery very close to where we were. And those oil refineries are always strategic targets. So every time there was a bombardment, there would be a huge fear that they would try to hit that refinery. So the whole family was on the rooftop and just trying to see if what if the refinery is going to be hit. And what I saw, the only thing I could see was their reaction to when it happened. So you feel that terrible thing where the one part of it is just sound. It's the most terrible sound that you can imagine. The ground shakes, and then all you see is basically a nervous breakdown of a whole family seeing their father die in a bombardment right in front of their eyes. And that's the most terrible thing that I can remember from war. It's not really about that the terror that I had because I thought we were going to be hit. It was seeing other people, seeing someone they love just go up in flames in front of them. And that's I put that into the story because that's the most powerful and the most terrible thing that I took with me from that part of my life. And I gave the character that as basically the core of his motivation, that he gets into the military himself and he wants to do the right thing, but he's also kind of a tragic hero in a sense that he basically turns into the violence that took his dad, and he becomes a soldier instead of kind of being anti-war. He becomes war himself, basically. And but he's going to also always be struggling with himself because he realizes that that's the case. But he's still trying to do the right thing. So he's going to be very torn, and that's going to make the story interesting.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Definitely. It's yeah, I just can't wait to read it. I really can't. It just sounds so powerful in so many ways. And I can see, we all know how compassionate you are, but hearing what you've witnessed and gone through in so many ways, it's not hard to see how and why you are the wonderful compassionate soul that you are. The official title for Earthraiser is also Voice for the Voiceless, which I love. And having Wolf, yes, he is partly you, or a good part of you, but also having had the pleasure of creating this character as well. What do you like most about him?
That's a very tricky question because up to this point, as I said, I have a problematic relationship with him because he's not too fond of me. So I never asked myself what I really like about him, because that puts me in a vulnerable situation because I know he's just not a fan of mine. But I think what I really like about him is that he does a lot of stuff that is not really in line, or we as a viewer are going to see that he's doing things that don't make sense, but he's not doing it ignorantly. He knows a lot about his own flaws, so he really and that's a huge part of how he struggles, because he sees the darker aspects of himself. He can see that, and he struggles with how to resolve that. That's actually one of the reasons that he has this complex of thinking he doesn't actually deserve to live. And that's also a part why he gets himself, he's a soldier, special ops, gets himself into situations where he's actually just waiting to die, because he thinks I shouldn't be here. There's no point of me being here. And that's because he sees all these darker aspects of his soul. And I think that's really what I like the most about him, because that makes him, so likable to me, although he just hates me.
See, I knew it was a good question. I said to Gareth, I want to ask Patrik that. He said, you can't ask him that. I said, no, I want to know what he likes about him. So I'm glad I asked.
It was a tricky question, though. I had to think a little bit. Most times when I get a question, I have a good answer right away, but I had to think about this.
You've always believed in the power of storytelling to bring the best parts of humanity to the surface. These are such valuable and encouraging words, especially for those who aren't necessarily able to take part in protests or vigils or similar kind of animal activist demonstrations. What advice would you give to other creative souls out there who could potentially use their talents to help the cause? You know, there's a lot of creatives, a lot of people, as I say, might not be able to do these other things. Do you have any advice for those folk, to use their talents?
Yeah, I really think everyone has some tool in their toolbox of abilities and skills and things that that they just powers that they have that they can use for good. And sometimes I think what's holding most people back in a lot of cases is that they think, well, yeah, I can, like, someone is really talented in drawing, for instance, and they think, yeah, but what's that? I can't save someone's life by drawing. Well, that's a mistake, because if you can draw something that is very powerful and that could influence someone, and then that someone can probably have a very different skill set, and he could do something just because he was influenced by, it's a domino effect. So a small thing can always lead to a huge thing. And like for me, I think a big part of what kind of set the groundwork for me to later on be able to kind of get behind the concept of animal equality for me was that I watched the Planet of the Apes movies, for instance, as a child. And what the classic Planet of the Apes movies, what they do is they opened my eyes to the nonsense of something that we, very automatically think is true, namely that humans are something special and different from animals. We have a soul, they don't. And that's what religious people would say. And even if you're not religious, you would still kind of have this automatic notion that we're somehow different from other animals. And when I watched these films as a child, I just thought, well, they're just switching roles in that film. And then when Dr. Zaius in the film says, yeah, but if humans are like apes, so basically just switching roles, how come they don't have a soul? And it's complete nonsense. And you're watching that and you realize, wait a second, that is nonsense. But if you turn it around, it's still nonsense. It doesn't get better when a human says it. So that was just someone's idea, and they wrote a story. It was a novel, and then out of that novel, they made the films based on that story. So I think everyone who has some way to create things. It can be art, it can be stories, it can be a song, or just draw something, or like what I started doing when I was an athlete. Just it wasn't sophisticated or anything. I was just I always almost said a meathead. I was just someone just lifting heavy things up and putting them down. There was nothing sophisticated about that. But I went vegetarian, which had nothing to do with what I was doing. And I thought, well, I'm doing good as a vegetarian and I feel great. I can just use my sport just to show that you don't have to eat meat and you can still be strong. And there was nothing, as I said, there was nothing sophisticated about it. But now, almost a decade or more than a decade later, I know that I've influenced millions of people's lives. And that's great, but it still goes back to a very little thing, very little decision that I made. So really that sense of powerlessness that we sometimes have, because we think, well, I'm just one human being in this huge world of billions of people. What can I do when the problems are so huge? No, there's this domino effect, and then also if you do something you're going to basically be a magnet for other people and for other souls out there who are going to be like-minded. And then together you can build networks, and like David and I, you can just start collaborating, and then you can make something absolutely awesome. Like the comic, I am absolutely absolutely talent free in when it comes to drawing things. So I could have never visualized my story in that way. And together with David, it was possible. So now all of a sudden, when we work together, we can create something that none of us could have done on their own. So every single one of us has the power to change everything.
Definitely. No, it's brilliant advice. Thank you. And yeah, I can definitely vouch to that. Before I found my voice sort of sitting up here and talking to you, I was quite shy, but I could write. So that was how I got into it. Was so yeah, we really completely believe in the power of creative activism, and it's just brilliant. I wouldn't be a chat if we didn't mention the Game Changers, and you sort of led quite nicely into that, saying about how you have really influenced millions of people. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that hasn't, obviously we knew of you before Game Changers, but for people that didn't, it was brilliant. It made us feel really smug, because we were like, we know you're going to watch this movie and you're going to see this guy and he's just going to blow you out of the water, because you're not going to be able to say that, yeah, we're wussy little, pasty, weak things as vegans. So it's been brilliant, throughout your career, you've proven that time and time again how strong vegans can be. Do you hope with the comic book that will just, keep on taking that image further still?
I don't think of it in that way, because I don't see Wolf as someone who does what I do. So while I intentionally basically try to turn myself into a tool for the vegan movement, which they could use to basically show to people, well, look, it's not a problem because this guy is doing all these things, and he's able to do it as a vegan. I did that intentionally. Wolf is he's not going to be an activist in that regard. There's going to be a movement building around him, and basically the vegan and the animal rights movement are going to connect with him, because obviously if you have this guy liberating animals everywhere, they're going to notice. So, and we were going to tell that in the story, and that's where I hope to give some give something back to the movement, and make people feel good about that. For instance, a part of that is also that I reached out to some vegan activists that I know, that I offered to have a cameo in the story. So they're basically going to appear at some point in the story, and they're going to be people from real life. Like one of them is Conscious Muscle, Jordan of Conscious Muscle. So he's the character of Jordan, who is a friend of Wolf's, is based on him. And then another character is just a friend of mine, Thomas Faber, who is based on Thomas Faber, a friend of mine, also a strength athlete, vegan strength athlete here from Berlin. So there's going to be that, but Wolf himself is just going to do these things because he's forced by his a thing that he has. And then all of that stuff is just going to happen around him. So that's very different from what I did, because what I did was intentional. There was always an evil plan that I had. So I knew exactly what I was doing when I started, telling everyone that I'm vegan, and because I was vegetarian before that. So you have to keep in mind, when I made the decision to go vegan, that happened after I won the title of Germany's Strongest Man as a vegetarian. And that's when I realized that, I was, I was getting a lot of media attention. And then I was getting feedback from people saying, well, this is so great because I saw you on TV and you were talking about all these things, and that resonates with me. But I was always afraid to express myself that way because I was afraid to be laughed at by my peers. So that's obviously, a young guy. But now when the strongest guy in the country talks like that, I can talk like that. So I kind of, emboldened them to express the more vulnerable parts of their personality. And I thought that was beautiful. So I thought, this is great. But at that point, I already knew that, wanting to reduce animal suffering, being vegetarian doesn't really, cut it. So, you're still consuming all these animal products. So you're still contributing to this industry that hurts animals. So, so I thought, well, if I'm in such a powerful position now, I should do a better job. I was just, really trying to use that position to kind of be a better role model, and that was why I went vegan in the end of 2011. And then everything I did from that point, I knew exactly what I was doing, and I was trying to accomplish this thing where I was trying to just open as many people's minds and eyes as possible. So yeah, and Wolves is not like that, because as a character, I mean, that's great to be a person like that in real life. I feel comfortable in my own skin, but that's a boring character. I wouldn't want to buy a book about myself. I don't know. I'm not having great adventures in my in my normal personal in my everyday life. So you want to have a character that is a little bit more little more tragedy, and there's got to be a little more happening inside the character. I'm too boring for that. Wolf's going to be way more interesting.
I'm sure we would beg to differ, but okay, we'll take your word for it.
So one of our favorite lines from you is, "My strength is my compassion." We feel like this embodies everything you do and everything you inspire. And would you say that this is an underlying message in Earthraiser?
It is exactly the core idea, basically. So I was, and I didn't realize it when I was doing it in the beginning, but when I was done with the outline of the story, I just realized that he was the embodiment of that message, because what his curse is basically an extreme form of compassion. He has no choice but to feel the pain of everyone around him. And that's, compassion basically means that when we see someone suffer, we're mirroring that. And there's literally a biological basis to that. It's something called mirror neurons. And what's happening is we feel the pain when we see someone in distress. We feel that actually ourselves, because our brain is making an internal simulation of what we're seeing, and we feel it like it's our pain. That's the reason why a lot of people don't want to watch these gruesome videos online, because it's just too much for them to take, too hurtful. So now we can of course discuss why people should still watch them, but that's the reason why a lot of people don't. So what he has is just an extreme form of that. And that's basically compassion taken to superpower level, and his superpower is compassion. Yeah, you can say that.
It's awesome. No, it's definitely one of my favorite lines, I think. And hopefully one day you will also find your way into your own superhero movie, be it as Wolverine or whoever you decide you want to be. In the meantime, how can we support your amazing project? Where do people need to go?
Yeah, so Earthraiser right now is on Kickstarter, and we're trying to get so our base goal is to get 12,000 euros to just basically print a limited edition of it, and then go from there and see that there's going to be more than just that limited edition, but that's just basically the starting point. So you can support us via going to the Earthraiser page on Kickstarter. You can, if you can contribute, of course, but you can also just share it with your friends. There's actually a lot of ways to just basically give us more visibility, because the idea around this is not just to tell this story, but ideally, if I'm lucky and we get this to kind of be successful, we can maybe even inspire other artists and other writers in the genre to incorporate a little bit more of this part of of our world into their stories, because there's so many superheroes and you see so little animal rights in these stories. And I think that that's really stupid of the industry to do that, because I know what's going on. It might be just that some people in who actually are the decision makers might think, oh, wait a second, I know I don't want to. I don't want this thing to look like there's angry vegans behind it, because that's going to probably turn off my other readers. But the point is, you don't have to do that. So what I want to show is you can talk about animal suffering and animal rights outside of even thinking about the vegan movement or the animal rights movement, because at the end of the day, I love the fact that the movement exists. I love everyone who puts, so much of their soul into trying to make the world better. But it's not about us. It's about the animals. And what I'm trying to accomplish with this story is I want to make it about the animals. I don't want to make it about the movement. So, and when you do that, everyone is. I think that everyone is going to like that, and like the Planets of the Apes is an absolute iconic cult status product of pop culture. Everybody knows the classic films, and nobody would think, oh, there were probably angry vegans behind it writing that story, because it's about the problem. It's not about us people who are trying to solve that problem in the real world. So hopefully it's going to probably inspire some people who are more talented than I am, and they're going to write a story that's going to be way better, and then everything's going to be great.
Oh, it's fantastic. And yeah, I'm just so glad that you're doing what you're doing, and thank you for doing this.
I'm actually looking forward to the remake of Planet of the Apes when they say those damn dirty vegans, So are there any other ways that people can keep up with the vegan badass? Any other sites that you want people to follow and keep up to date on?
Yeah, so basically, you can follow me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I, from time to time, put out some videos about nutrition, supplements, training, and everything that happens in my life. Like, for instance, the newest video, of course, is about Earthraiser. And then Facebook. I'm on Facebook, and then on Instagram. So that's basically the social media that I'm doing. And yeah, and then everything else that I do outside of that, I always post about that in these different outlets. So if you're following me there, you're gonna know everything that is happening. Like, for instance, when this whole pandemic is going to be a little bit more under control, I'm going to start doing appearances again, and then I'm always also posting about these appearances, so when I'm going to be somewhere next.